Social Psychology Part 3. This section focuses on group dynamics and how groups affect our behavior. One of the first theories we're going to examine in group dynamics is social facilitation theory. This is the idea that when others observe us, we become excited or aroused. This arousal strengthens the most likely response, the correct one on an easy task and an incorrect one on a difficult task. Thus, when we are being observed, we perform well-learned tasks more quickly and accurately, and unmastered tasks less quickly and accurately. So think of athletics. If there's a particular skill, say on the basketball court, that you know very well, when there's people observing you, you tend to, like at a game, you tend to perform better. If, however, you are attempting a skill that's new or that you don't know very well, and you then are observed by a group, the excitement or the arousal from the group observing you will actually make your performance go down. Conformity studies. There have been a lot of interesting studies and research done on what makes us conform to a group. So when we look at conformity studies, we're thinking about how we adjust our behavior or thinking to coincide with a group standard or what the group values. One of the famous studies that we're going to be looking at a video clip is ASH. And if you look at this, you can see the standard line and the comparison lines. And in just a moment, I will show you a clip from this study. As you can see from this slide, about 1/3 of the participants conformed to the group and what the group was saying about what they were seeing with the lines. In order to strengthen conformity among a group, there's different aspects that lead to a strengthening of conformity. One, if the group is unanimous, because to disagree would require social courage. So in the ASH study, a person had to disagree with what the other people said they were seeing. And so that takes social courage. If the group has at least 3 people, if a person admires the group's status, wants to be a part of the group, if one had made no prior commitment to any response. So if you're being asked to go along with a group and on some sort of decision or activity, and if you have not previously stated your opinion or which way you are going to vote or participate, then you're more likely to conform to the group because you wouldn't have to go against what you previously said you were going to do. If others in the group are observing your behavior, and if your culture strongly encourages respect for social standards, so like in a collectivist culture. So again, in order to, you're more likely to conform to a group if the group is at least 3 people, the group is unanimous, so you'd be the only one going against the group. You didn't have any prior commitment to any prior response to the situation. Other people were observing you, other people in the group were observing your behavior, and if your culture strongly encouraged respect for social standards. Another really interesting study under the area of conformity, or just doing what you're told, is Milgram's study of obedience. And in fact, in the prison experiment, they reference Milgram several times. We're going to look at a clip of this. This experiment, which today probably also would not pass an internal review board or an institutional review board. This study involved participants thinking that they were delivering electric shocks to another participant and thinking that the level of the shock was being increased each time. And there's some interesting findings of this study, and I'm going to show you a clip of that. What is fascinating about the Milgram study is that the researchers initially thought that eventually there would be a point where the participants in the study, those who believed they were administering electric shocks to a person in another room, that there would be a point where those people would refuse to participate because they would be intentionally causing pain on another person. However, 100% of the subjects, if you look at this graph, obeyed the experimenter. In other words, delivered the shock at the beginning. But it really didn't drop off that much. The majority of the subjects continued to obey the experimenter in delivering the shocks, even though they were in the high danger zone of electric voltage, or they believed. They weren't actually administering a shock. There was an actor that was reacting on the other side. But it was scary, and it gave a lot of insight into things like how did people act as a guard in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany? Like, what would allow someone to inflict that kind of pain on someone else? It was really a fascinating study. What we learned from the Milgram study is that ordinary people can do very shocking things. There's a lot of ethical issues with these kind of studies, and it would not have received approval from today's Internal Review Board, which is the different organizations like universities and hospitals have these IRBs, remember, to make sure that, that these studies follow ethical guidelines. But it really was eye-opening and groundbreaking in terms of allowing people insight in that ordinary people can be pushed to do extraordinary and out of things that they would normally be considered out of character. The next section we're going to look at has to do with group dynamics. So not necessarily our obedience to a group or our ability to conform to a group, but how do we act when we're a part of the group? And so this is a pretty interesting area for social psychologists to research. The first area is social loafing. And I like this term. The tendency for people in a group to exert less effort when they're pooling their efforts toward a common goal than if they were individually accountable. A good example of this is when you have a group project and you're not getting an individual grade, but instead just getting a group grade, often you will see social loafing. People will put forth less effort than if they're also going to be held personally and individually responsible. It's an interesting activity. If you look at this bike here, you know, if these people are pedaling alone, they probably exert more effort. But since they're in a group, they tend to exert less effort. Group polarization. This enhancement of a group's prevailing tendencies is called group polarization. And it occurs when people within a group discuss an idea that most of them either favor or oppose. Group polarization can have beneficial results, as when it amplifies a sought-after spiritual awareness or reinforces the resolve of those in a self-help group, like AA. Or it can strengthen feelings of tolerance in a low prejudice group. But it can also have dire consequences. For example, George Bishop and several researchers discovered that when high prejudice students discuss racial issues together, they become more prejudiced. So groups tend to make more extreme decisions than the individual. So this shows you a graph depicting the fact that high prejudice groups, when they discuss issues among other like-minded people, they tend to strengthen this prejudice. So it's kind of interesting. You might see this in political party extremes, people that are very conservative or very liberal. When they are surrounded and have a discussion with people of the same mindset, their feelings become strengthened rather than weakened. Groupthink is a term that's thrown around a lot in today's vernacular. This is when the mode of thinking that occurs when the desire for harmony in a decision-making group overrides a realistic appraisal of alternatives. So people that are a part of the group, they suppress their opinions or any concerns they have about the ideas supported by the group because they want harmony. It's more important that the group be harmonious than to have, you know, differences of opinion. And this is worse in highly cohesive or strongly bonded groups. This is how things like Jim Jones massacre, where they did a group suicide. If you had a concern, they were more interested in preserving harmony than in doing probably the right thing. Fraternity hazing would be another example. De-individuation is abandoning normal restraints to the power of the group. To be de-individuated is to be less self-conscious and less restrained when in a group situation. It often occurs when group participation makes people feel aroused and anonymous, like a food fight in a cafeteria. So when you're part of a group, you lose your individual identity, and it's easier to do things that you normally as an individual wouldn't do. A good example of de-individuation in practice is the Zimbardo prison study. It showed how we de-individuate and become the roles we are given. And so we already saw a video on that And it was pretty alarming how quickly they were able to, lose that sense of individual identity and responsibility. This concludes the section on section 3 of our social psychology lecture. The end.